Welcome, the Lord's chosen. Some storms exist not to break you, but to expose everyone who expected you to fall. There are moments in life where the universe sits back, folds its arms, and says, "Let's see what you do with this mess." And what you just went through? That wasn't a mess. That was a full-blown psychological obstacle course designed by people who seriously underestimated your resilience. Here's the wild part. According to behavioral studies, most people's decision-making collapses under emotional stress. They either lash out, shut down, or spiral. But you handled the situation in a way that made observers stop mid-bite, mid-scroll, mid-gossip session and whisper, "Wait, how are they this composed?" Because instead of playing the role you were pushed into, you rewrote the entire script. And you did it without theatrics, without begging for validation, and without making the situation your whole personality. Honestly, the way you maneuvered through that chaos was so impressive that even the people who caused it were probably confused. They expected you to break. You gave them a character development montage instead. And let's be real, if handling nonsense was an Olympic sport, you'd have walked away with a gold medal, and the interview afterward would have been iconic. Yes, thank you. I'd like to thank life for the plot twist, my peace of mind for staying loyal, and my sense of humor for refusing to die. What happened wasn't pretty, wasn't fair, and definitely wasn't something anyone would sign up for. But your reaction, that's where the story turns from chaos to revelation. People aren't impressed because something disgusting happened. They're impressed because of who you proved yourself to be when everything around you was designed to provoke you. This is the moment where the chosen one archetype comes alive. The point where you show that strength isn't loud, confidence isn't forced, and composure isn't accidental. You handled it with a clarity that made the situation look smaller, and your character look bigger. And that shift, that undeniable rise, is exactly why people can't stop talking about you. Number one, you didn't react. You recalibrated. Most people explode the moment something disgusting or disrespectful happens. They fire off emotional responses like fireworks, and honestly, that's what the world expects. But you did something so rare that it caught everyone off guard. You paused, you steadied yourself, and you shifted your entire internal system before making a move. That's recalibration, not reaction. And it's a level of emotional intelligence most people never develop. Recalibrating doesn't mean you didn't feel hurt, insulted, or shocked. It means you refused to let those feelings pilot the plane. You didn't hand over the controls to anger or embarrassment. You sat with what happened and allowed your mind to process the situation with clarity instead of chaos. And that alone changed the outcome in a way reacting never could. People noticed the difference even if they couldn't name it. They saw you staying steady when the situation was messy. They saw you thinking instead of attacking, observing instead of panicking. It made people realize you operate on a completely different wavelength. You're not controlled by impulse, you're guided by intention. The reason this impressed so many people is because recalibration means self-awareness. It means you didn't just ask, "What did they do to me?" You silently asked, "What's the smartest next move?" That's the kind of thinking that turns emotional traps into strategic wins. You didn't need to yell, clap back, or create drama to prove a point. Your calmness did that for you. While they were hoping you'd lose control, you were busy checking in with your values, your long-term goals, and the kind of person you aim to be. That's why they couldn't drag you into their chaos. You weren't trying to match their energy. You were adjusting your own so you wouldn't be pulled off your path. Recalibration makes people uncomfortable because it means their attempt to manipulate, provoke, or embarrass you didn't land the way they hoped. They wanted a reaction. They got strategy. They expected noise. You gave them intelligence. They tried to destabilize you, and you responded by becoming even more grounded. That's why this moment stood out. You didn't get lost in the situation. You outgrew it in real time. Number 2, you understood the motive behind the mess, not just the mess itself. Most people get caught up in what happened. The disrespect, the drama, the shock, the emotions flooding the moment. They focus on the surface level chaos because it's loud and distracting. But you looked deeper. You didn't stop at the behavior. You studied the intention behind it. That alone changed everything, because once you understand why someone acted the way they did, the whole situation shifts into a different light. You recognize that the mess wasn't random. It came from someone's insecurity, jealousy, fear, or need for validation. It came from their unresolved issues leaking into your life. And instead of taking it personally, you connected the dots. That is a level of wisdom most people never reach, because it requires stepping out of the emotional reaction and stepping into analysis. It's not easy, but it's powerful. People were impressed because you didn't get dragged into the drama. You treated the situation like information. You observed the energy, the tone, the pattern, and you realized, this isn't about me. It's about what they're struggling with internally. That single mindset shift protected your peace while exposing their true intentions without you saying a word. When you understand motive, the anger dissolves, the temptation to clap back weakens, and the situation loses its power over you. Suddenly their behavior looks small and predictable, and your response becomes intentional instead of reactive. You weren't fooled by their performance. You saw the insecurity behind their confidence, the desperation behind their confidence, the fear hidden behind their boldness. This understanding is what made your handling of the situation so impressive. You didn't fight the smoke. You identified the fire. You didn't argue with the symptoms. You recognized the root. You didn't let the chaos trick you into thinking it had control. The moment you understood their motive, you reclaimed the upper hand without needing to confront, accuse, or expose anyone. And that's what people noticed. You moved from awareness, not emotion. You weren't blinded by the noise because you were busy reading the truth underneath it. That's rare. That's maturity. And that's exactly why the way you handled that situation left such a powerful impression. Number 3, you separated the event from your identity. Most people make the mistake of merging their sense of self with every insult, betrayal, or chaotic event they encounter. The moment something disgusting or unfair happens, they internalize it. Suddenly, their self-worth is tied to what others said or did, and their identity becomes fragile and reactive. You, however, did something far more extraordinary. You treated the situation as an external event, completely separate from who you are at your core. That distinction gave you power that most people never even know exists. You understood that the situation could challenge you, frustrate you, or even anger you, but it could never define you unless you allowed it. By keeping your sense of self intact, you refused to give the drama permission to alter your character. This is why your composure was so magnetic and unsettling to onlookers. They were expecting the scene to shape your reaction, and you refused to play along. You weren't defensive, reactive, or apologetic. You simply maintained alignment with your own truth while the chaos unfolded around you. What made this so impressive is that separating yourself from the event requires clarity and discipline. It's not passive avoidance or ignoring the problem. It's recognizing that your identity is independent of what happens to you, no matter how messy or ugly. You saw the situation as an experience, not as a verdict on your worth. That perspective allowed you to act with intention rather than emotion, making every decision calculated and every response controlled. People were drawn to that because it's rare. Most individuals let events dictate their behavior, letting every conflict redefine their image in the eyes of others. You did the opposite. You observed without absorbing. You engaged without sacrificing yourself. And the result? A quiet, undeniable authority that made people stop, watch, and reassess their expectations of you. By separating the event from your identity, you turned a potentially destabilizing situation into a demonstration of power. You didn't just survive it, you owned it while remaining fully, unmistakably yourself. That is what left everyone stunned and deeply impressed. Number 4, you didn't fight for dignity, you preserved it. When most people face a disgusting or humiliating situation, their first instinct is to prove themselves, to fight back, to argue, or to make sure the world knows they are still worthy. They believe dignity is something you have to defend outwardly, like a shield against every insult or slight. But you showed something far more powerful. You preserved your dignity without needing to prove it to anyone. That's a completely different level of strength, and it's the reason people were so impressed. You didn't let the situation dictate your sense of self. You didn't scramble to show others that you were not broken or still in control. Instead, you held yourself intact from the inside out. Preserving dignity isn't about silence or avoidance. It's about maintaining your own standards of behavior, even when the environment is chaotic, toxic, or designed to provoke you. You stayed aligned with your values and refused to descend to the level of disrespect or manipulation that was aimed at you. This is what made your response so magnetic. People could feel the difference between someone scrambling to maintain appearances and someone whose dignity is untouchable. They noticed that while others were losing composure, getting defensive or lashing out, you were composed and unwavering. You weren't performing for approval. You weren't seeking validation. You were simply living in alignment with who you are, and that made the situation look small, almost trivial in comparison to your presence. Preserving dignity also requires deep self-awareness and confidence. You had to know exactly what you stood for, what you would allow, and what you would refuse. That awareness let you navigate the chaos without sacrificing your sense of self. People who expected you to flinch or retaliate were stunned because their attempts to shake you off balance didn't work. By choosing to preserve rather than fight, you elevated yourself above the mess. You showed that true strength doesn't come from proving your worth to the world. It comes from never letting the world take it from you. That quiet, unwavering command of your own dignity is what left everyone watching deeply impressed and quietly reverent. Number 5, you refuse to let the situation recruit you into becoming the villain. When people face a messy, disgusting situation, the easiest trap is to respond in kind. It feels natural to match the energy, to throw insults, to retaliate, to prove a point. That's what most people do. They step into the role the chaos wants them to play. But you did something far rarer. You refused to be recruited into someone else's story. You didn't let their actions dictate the version of yourself that would show up. That decision alone separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. Refusing to become the villain isn't about avoiding conflict or pretending nothing happened. It's about control, awareness, and moral clarity. You recognize that reacting like they expected, angry, defensive, vengeful, would only serve their narrative, not yours. It would have dragged you into the mud and given them the satisfaction of creating a spectacle with your name attached. Instead, you stayed above it. You handled the situation with precision, awareness, and calm authority. People noticed because what you did defied instinct. Most are conditioned to fight back when wronged, and when someone doesn't, it creates confusion and curiosity. They weren't sure if you were unaffected, untouchable, or simply smarter. but what they were witnessing was strategy in motion, the refusal to let anyone else write your story for you. You controlled your behavior, your energy, and your response, and in doing so, you rewrote the power dynamic entirely. The brilliance of this choice is that it transforms the situation into a mirror. When someone tries to provoke you and you refuse to play the role they designed, it exposes their instability, their immaturity, and their lack of control. The chaos no longer serves them, it serves you. You become the observer and the leader in a space where everyone else is reacting blindly. By refusing to become the villain, you turned an ugly scenario into a demonstration of character and self-mastery. You showed that true power isn't in winning arguments or exposing faults. It's in staying untouchable, intentional, and unshakable. And that is exactly why people left that situation both impressed and unsettled, because they realized you had risen above the script they were trying to write for you. Number 6, you handled humiliation without internalizing it. Humiliation has a way of sticking to most people. It gnaws at your confidence, rewrites your narrative, and makes you replay every moment in your head as if the world's judgment defines you. But you did something that most people can't even comprehend. You experienced the humiliation without letting it seep into who you are. You didn't carry it into your identity, your decisions, or your peace of mind. That is a level of self-mastery that instantly commands respect. Handling humiliation without internalizing it doesn't mean ignoring it or pretending it didn't sting. It means acknowledging what happened, recognizing the weight of it, and then consciously deciding it won't alter your self-worth. You saw the situation for what it was, an external event, flawed and messy, but not a reflection of your character or value. That perspective gave you freedom to respond with clarity instead of reaction. People notice because it's rare. Most individuals will let a single moment of shame dictate their behavior for days, weeks, or even years. They replay it, overthink it, and allow it to erode their confidence. You, on the other hand, processed the moment and kept moving, untouched at the core. You didn't need to explain, justify, or defend yourself. Your dignity remained intact, and your presence remained unshaken. The real impact of this choice is subtle but undeniable. By refusing to internalize humiliation, you created an invisible boundary that others couldn't cross. Their attempt to destabilize you failed. Their expectation that you would crumble, lash out, or seek validation evaporated. You stayed grounded while the chaos swirled around you. This ability doesn't just protect you in a single situation. It builds an unshakable foundation for every challenge that comes after. It's the difference between surviving humiliation and transcending it. You didn't just endure what happened, you transformed it into proof of your resilience. People saw it, and that's why they were so impressed. You showed that your identity and your confidence are yours alone, untouchable by the messiness or cruelty of the world. Number 7, you exposed their intentions by staying consistent. Most people respond to chaos by matching the energy around them. They react unpredictably, lash out, or try to defend themselves in ways that reveal their own insecurities. You did the opposite. You stayed consistent, calm, and measured, and in doing so, you exposed the true intentions of everyone involved without saying a single word. That consistency became a mirror for their behavior, revealing what they were really trying to do, and it made everyone realize just how controlled and grounded you were. Consistency in the face of conflict isn't passive, it's strategic. Every person who tried to provoke you or manipulate the situation expected a certain reaction, an emotional outburst, or a defensive posture. When you didn't give them what they wanted, their true colors were laid bare. You didn't need to point out lies, threats, or hidden agendas. Your unwavering behavior made it impossible for them to hide the chaos they were creating, and that clarity is what impressed people the most. Staying consistent requires self-awareness and discipline. It means knowing your boundaries, your values, and your responses so well that external events can't shake you. You were able to process the situation internally and respond in a way that aligned with who you truly are. That level of control is rare because most people are easily swayed by others' expectations, fear, or attempts at provocation. You weren't swayed, you were steady. The result of your consistency was more powerful than any confrontation could have been. It highlighted the contrast between their instability and your composure. People noticed that while others were reacting with confusion, aggression, or desperation, you were moving with clarity, purpose, and focus. That contrast exposed their motives faster than any accusation or explanation ever could. By staying consistent, you didn't just survive the situation, you turned it into a showcase of character. You revealed what others were really made of while quietly demonstrating what strength and composure looked like. People were impressed because they realized that your steadiness wasn't coincidence, it was intentional, and it set you apart from everyone else caught up in the chaos. Number 8, you didn't seek revenge because you understood the cost of it. Most people, when faced with betrayal, humiliation, or a disgusting situation, immediately think about retaliation. The instinct to get even is strong because it feels like the fastest way to reclaim power or prove worth. But you didn't fall into that trap. You understood that revenge isn't a solution. It's a chain that keeps you tethered to the very negativity you're trying to escape. That understanding alone separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. Choosing not to seek revenge requires clarity and foresight. You recognize that reacting out of anger or hurt doesn't erase what happened. It only drags you deeper into the same emotional storm. Revenge might offer a temporary sense of satisfaction, but it comes with invisible costs. It drains energy, clouds judgment, and often damages your reputation more than theirs. You saw that engaging in retaliation would only prolong the situation, making it about them instead of about reclaiming your own peace. By refusing revenge, you flipped the narrative entirely. While others expected chaos to breed chaos, you showed that true control comes from restraint. You didn't need to hurt anyone back to prove your strength. Your composure and forward movement said more than any act of retaliation ever could. That quiet superiority unsettled people because it wasn't loud or showy. It was undeniable. They realized that their attempt to provoke a response failed, leaving them exposed in their own toxicity. This choice also demonstrated emotional intelligence. You measured the long-term impact of every action, prioritizing growth, reputation, and personal peace over short-term satisfaction. People were drawn to that because it's rare to see someone rise above instinctual impulses and think several steps ahead. By not seeking revenge, you reclaimed your power on your terms. You transformed what could have been a cycle of hurt into a moment of dominance without aggression. You proved that strength isn't measured by how you punish others. It's measured by how well you protect yourself from being dragged into negativity. That understanding left everyone watching impressed and quietly in awe, because they realized the person they tried to provoke was already untouchable. Number 9, you prioritized long-term peace over short-term ego. Most people, when faced with a disgusting or chaotic situation, act immediately to defend their ego. They argue, they retaliate, they try to prove they're right, and they focus on winning in the moment. That's instinctive. It feels urgent. It feels necessary. But you did something far more rare and powerful. You chose long-term peace over temporary satisfaction. You understood that reacting to protect your ego might feel good for a moment, but it would cost you more than it was worth in energy, clarity, and stability. Prioritizing long-term peace requires patience and awareness. You didn't allow the situation to dictate your next move. Instead, you considered what would truly serve you in the bigger picture. You recognized that short-term wins, snappy comebacks, dramatic responses, proving someone wrong, might feel satisfying now, but they would tether you to the chaos. They would let the situation linger in your mind and compromise your calm. You decided that maintaining your inner stability was far more valuable than satisfying a fleeting desire to assert dominance or prove a point. People were impressed because most would not have this level of discipline. They would have fed into the moment, escalating tensions and giving the situation more power. You, however, remained deliberate and in control. You didn't just survive the scenario, you turned it into an opportunity to reinforce your own calm, composure, and authority. The fact that you weren't chasing immediate gratification made your presence feel unshakable. This approach also shows emotional intelligence at its highest level. You measured the cost of every action not by how it looked to others, but by how it affected your inner world. You weren't performing for attention or validation. You were acting from a place of foresight and self-respect, understanding that the most powerful victory is the one that preserves your peace long after the chaos has faded. By prioritizing long-term peace over short-term ego, you demonstrated a level of control and wisdom that unsettles people because it's not common. You proved that strength isn't measured by how loud you fight. It's measured by how steady you remain, no matter how messy the situation gets. Number 10. You responded as if nothing they did could rewrite your story. Most people react to chaos as if their entire narrative depends on the approval, judgment, or attacks of others. They bend, break, or defend themselves frantically because they believe every insult or betrayal could change who they are in the world's eyes. You didn't play that game. You responded to the situation as if their actions, words, or attempts at manipulation couldn't alter your story, and that perspective made all the difference. When you acted this way, it wasn't arrogance or detachment, it was clarity. You understood that your identity, your values, and your path are yours alone. Nothing anyone else does can rewrite the foundation you've built unless you allow it. That mindset allowed you to respond without fear, without overthinking, and without falling into the trap of trying to prove yourself. You didn't defend your reputation because you didn't need to. It was intact. You didn't react with drama because you knew the situation had no power over the core of who you are. People noticed immediately because this level of unshakable self-possession is rare. Most individuals let external events dictate their behavior, adjusting themselves to suit circumstances or to calm the noise around them. You did the opposite. You held your own narrative like a shield, showing that the chaos was temporary and insignificant compared to the story you're writing for yourself. Your composure was a quiet announcement. Attempts to manipulate, shame, or provoke you would fail because your story isn't dictated by anyone else. This approach also communicates power without words. By responding as if nothing could change your story, you made it clear that your energy, time, and attention are not up for negotiation. People who tried to destabilize you were left exposed and confused, realizing that their efforts were futile. You didn't just manage the situation. You transformed it into a stage where your integrity, calm, and self-sovereignty were undeniable. That's why people were impressed. You weren't reacting to someone else's chaos. You were demonstrating that your story, your journey, and your power remain completely untouchable. Number 11. You handled the situation like someone who has already outgrown the room. Most people get trapped by the energy around them. They react to negativity, gossip, or manipulation, as if the room itself defines them. They bend, stumble, or overextend themselves trying to fit into the chaos. You, however, acted differently. You handled the situation as someone who had already outgrown it. You weren't participating in the drama because you were operating on a higher level. Your presence made it clear that the environment was too small for the mindset and strength you carry. When you approach situations this way, it's not about arrogance, it's about awareness and detachment. You recognize the limits of the people or space you're dealing with, and you refuse to be dragged down to match them. Their energy, their attempts to provoke, their attempts to manipulate. They couldn't reach you because you were already operating in a different frequency. You handled the situation with precision, choosing responses that preserved your power rather than feeding the drama. People were immediately impressed because most never see this. Most people fight within the confines of the room, thinking the problem, the insult, or the chaos has the ability to define them. You proved it doesn't. By moving with calm authority, by refusing to be shaken, and by keeping your focus on what matters most to you, you showed that you are not limited by anyone's expectations or environment. You demonstrated that the room only has influence over you if you allow it. Handling a situation like this also communicates confidence without words. It sends a quiet but undeniable message. You belong to a higher standard, one that isn't dictated by petty attacks or temporary chaos. Observers can see it, and it forces people to reconsider their assumptions about who you are and what you can handle. By approaching the situation from this elevated perspective, you didn't just navigate the chaos, you transcended it. The room, the people, and the drama became secondary, and your growth and power became primary. That is what left everyone stunned. You weren't just surviving the moment. You were proving that you operate on a level beyond the petty limits around you. Number 12. You refuse to let the situation make you predictable. Most people, when faced with a messy or toxic situation, fall into patterns. They react in ways that others expect, repeating the same mistakes or responses over and over. Predictability gives control to the people trying to provoke or manipulate you. You did the opposite. You refused to let the situation define how you would respond. You acted with awareness and strategy, keeping your actions unexpected and your presence unpredictable. That unpredictability is what gave you the upper hand and left everyone watching stunned. Refusing to be predictable doesn't mean being erratic or reckless. It means responding deliberately in ways that align with your goals, values, and inner calm, rather than letting external chaos dictate your behavior. You were able to assess the situation, anticipate expectations, and deliberately choose responses that would preserve your power, unsettle the manipulators, and maintain your composure. People around you were left confused because they couldn't anticipate your next move. They expected drama, outrage, or a defensive stance, and instead you responded in a measured, intentional way that they weren't prepared for. This level of control is rare because most people allow emotion, fear, or ego to dictate their behavior. By refusing to be predictable, you created a silent authority. You demonstrated that your mind and energy are yours to direct, not something others can manipulate for their own satisfaction. Every action you took showed that you are fully aware of the situation, fully in control of your response, and fully unshaken by attempts to destabilize you. Your unpredictability wasn't about confusing others for fun. It was about maintaining sovereignty over yourself and the moment. It revealed strength, intelligence, and foresight in a way that no loud reaction could have. People were impressed because it made clear that they couldn't control you, bait you, or guess your next move. By refusing to be predictable, you didn't just survive the situation. You turned it into proof of your mastery over your own behavior, your energy, and your story, leaving a lasting impression on everyone involved. Number 13. You didn't just survive the disrespect. You transformed the meaning of it. Most people experience disrespect and humiliation as a weight that sticks to them. They replay the moment, feel the sting, and allow it to define how they see themselves or how they react to others. You, however, did something far more powerful. You didn't just endure the situation, you transformed its meaning entirely. You took what was meant to wound you and used it as proof of your strength, clarity, and growth. That shift is what sets you apart and leaves people genuinely impressed. Transforming the meaning of disrespect requires perspective and control. You didn't focus on what they did to you. You focused on what their actions revealed about them and what they could never take from you. You understood that the situation was not an assessment of your value or capability. It was an opportunity to observe, learn, and rise above. By seeing the event as information rather than a judgment, you removed its power over your emotions and choices. People noticed because this approach is rare. Most respond to disrespect by matching the energy, defending themselves, or internalizing the negativity. You didn't give the situation that power. Instead, you took control of the narrative. Their attempts to provoke or shame you didn't create chaos. They highlighted your composure. What was intended as a weapon became a mirror that reflected your strength back at them. The true brilliance of transforming disrespect is that it allows you to grow through the challenge rather than be limited by it. Every insult, slight, or ugly action became a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block. You demonstrated that your self-worth isn't contingent on other people's behavior. It's rooted in your own understanding of who you are and the path you're on. By transforming the meaning of disrespect, you turned a potentially toxic moment into an undeniable display of power and mastery. People weren't just impressed, they were unsettled in the best way, realizing that the person they tried to undermine had already risen above the story they were trying to write. You didn't just survive, you redefined the situation entirely, proving that your strength is internal, unstoppable, and untouchable. Number 14, you held your power without announcing it. Most people feel the need to prove their strength when faced with a messy or disrespectful situation. They raise their voice, make bold statements, or over-explain themselves to ensure that everyone sees they're in control. You didn't do that. You held your power quietly, confidently, and completely, without the need for recognition. That invisible authority is what left people stunned, because it's impossible to fake or imitate. When someone carries power this way, it's felt rather than seen, and it commands respect in a way no words or gestures ever could. Holding your power without announcing it requires deep self-assurance. You didn't seek validation from anyone or try to force acknowledgement of your composure. Instead, you acted from a place of clarity and intention. Your energy and presence spoke for themselves. Every decision, every step, and every response you made reinforced the fact that you were unshakable, and people couldn't help but notice. That quiet confidence is disarming. It makes observers aware that they cannot manipulate, provoke, or control you. People were impressed because most confuse loudness or aggression with strength. You demonstrated that real power doesn't need to be displayed. It doesn't need to be proven. You didn't escalate the situation or try to dominate through words. Your power was steady, deliberate, and internal. It didn't rely on external validation, and that made it untouchable. The subtlety of holding power silently also changes the dynamics of the situation entirely. Attempts to provoke or destabilize you failed because you weren't responding to them. You were responding to yourself. That shift forced people to confront the reality that their actions had no effect on you, and in doing so, they revealed their own instability. By holding your power without announcing it, you created a presence that was undeniable, authoritative, and self-sufficient. You didn't need drama, confrontation, or loud declarations to prove anything. You simply existed with strength, and the situation, no matter how messy, became a stage where your calm, confidence, and mastery spoke louder than any words ever could. That is why people couldn't stop being impressed. Conclusion. The way you handled that disgusting, chaotic situation wasn't just impressive. It was a masterclass in self-mastery, strategy, and unshakable presence. You didn't react impulsively, you recalibrated. You saw the motives behind the mess rather than just the mess itself. You separated the situation from your identity, preserved your dignity, and refused to be recruited into anyone else's story. You handled humiliation without internalizing it, stayed consistent to reveal intentions, and understood that revenge would only cost you more than it was worth. You prioritized long-term peace over short-term ego, responded as if nothing could rewrite your story, and handled the chaos like someone who had already outgrown the room. You refused to be predictable, transformed disrespect into proof of your strength, and held your power without ever needing to announce it. Every single action, choice, and response showed that real power isn't about drama, confrontation, or validation. It's about clarity, control, and mastery over yourself. People couldn't help but be impressed because what they witnessed wasn't just surviving a difficult situation, it was transcending it. You demonstrated that strength isn't measured by how you react, but by how well you maintain your integrity, composure, and authority when everyone else is losing theirs. That's what separates ordinary responses from extraordinary ones, and that's what makes you unforgettable in the eyes of anyone watching. If you found this breakdown powerful and want to continue leveling up your awareness and presence, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button if this resonated, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and share it with someone who needs to see this today. Your journey to mastery doesn't have to be silent. Let's grow and rise together. Stay blessed always.